Well, Joan Milliman is with us right now with the Roberts Rule Study Club. Nice to see you.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
And today we are going to be looking at something that was certainly pertinent. Nominations, elections, conventions, and this also fits what we just had with the Democrats and Republicans in a sense, because a lot of us sometimes forget that they are indeed a group, a club, so to speak.
Yes.
I mean, a huge one.
Big club.
But they are. A lot of people think they're when it comes to these parties, that they're government parties, and they wonder why. Why do they have conventions? Why do they dress with hats and silly things? Well, you know what? They're their own entity. People forget that, but they follow Robert's rules as well, right?
They sure do.
They try to.
Okay.
Maybe not always, but. So let's talk about nominations.
Okay, this is something we are very familiar with here, I'm sure, but as you can see, nominations are a formal proposal of the body to fill an office or a position, and it's usually when you're voting for officers of a group or a club. So nominations can come from the floor. The chairman simply says nominations are open for chairman or for president, vice president, so on. Or sometimes a nominating committee selects officers suggests officers, and a slate is presented. And in our case, here we have self-nominations for candidates for the not offices, but to be board members, for example. So we do have that. Well, the advantage of self-nomination is everybody wants to do it. Sometimes when you're nominated, you don't want to do it.
Right, exactly.
One thing to remember when there are nominations, people can actually, in some places, shout from the floor, "I nominate so-and-so for president." Well, we don't do that. We recognize people, but that's not necessary. And you don't have to second a nomination. It's just put up, you know, president, so many people, vice president, so many people.
Okay, so you don't have to second it, but obviously the person must accept their
the nomination.
Yes.
Exactly.
That would be important.
And most nominations are conducted by ballot. And we're talking about officers of groups. And the ballots are usually written. When you have a ballot, you can write in names too, if it's agreeable to that person.
All right.
Election becomes final when the chairman finally announces the result. Now, if there's a candidate that was elected and they're not there, if they don't refuse, they're told that they got the nomination and they got the office. If they don't refuse it, nominations are closed.
Okay, there you go. All right.
So that's pretty much it for nominations and balloting and so on. I'm not going to go too much more into that.
Now, the nature of a convention, and the convention serves as a single deliberative body, right? Right.
Now that they're very different. I'll get into how they're different from a regular meeting in just a minute.
Okay.
A couple things are different. They have candidates to a convention have to be selected by a committee. There are committees for everything in a convention.
Yes.
And but the rights and duties of a delegate. If you're selected to be a delegate to a convention, you have to go through a committee, and your credentials are examined, and then you are seated at the committee. You have a right to be seated.
Okay.
And at the convention, you also have the obligation to attend the business meetings and to vote as instructed by your original group. For example, I've been to a couple of conventions. One, I was at the Episcopal Church Convention, huge national convention. And so lots of issues come up, and you discuss them at your local unit.
Right.
And you vote the way your unit says you're supposed to be voting, because you're representing that unit.
Exactly.
Then you report back to your organizations as to how the convention went, how the business meetings went.
Then there are alternates and how they replaced it.
Yeah. So usually, you know, you don't have just delegates to a convention. You have alternates in case something happens. Usually it's the same number of alternates as there are delegates. It helps. And an alternate, like the delegate has to attend all the business meetings. They have to know what's going on just as much as the delegates in case something happens. They can't vote until they are, if they take the place of a delegate, then they become a delegate themselves.
Okay.
Then they can vote, but other than that, they can't.
Okay. And how convention differs from other meetings?
Mostly because they're bigger,
Yeah.
and mostly because they only meet maybe once a year.
Right.
Now you have the Music Educators National Convention, for example. That's a yearly thing, and it's national. Then I've been to another one, international conventions all over the world. So you have these huge meetings. Well, that's one way they're very different. And then they set up rules for that convention, which makes them different sometimes from meetings.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so there are other differences. Another thing that's different about them is they have to get organized before they can ever meet.
Yes.
And it's different from any meeting you'd ever go to here. First of all, they have to establish who's going to be able to vote. So all this committee meets, and that's the I'm trying to think of the word. The credentials committee examines your credentials, and then if you pass, you can vote. You're going to be a part of the membership there. Then there's the rules committee. The rules committee actually decides on what rules are going to be followed specifically for that convention, or just general rules of order. But they set up rules, and you know that you've seen the national conventions, and you know that there are lots of rules there, and sometimes they're followed and sometimes they're not.
Exactly. And we see how that between, obviously between the two big parties, and because those are televised, and we all kind of knows that they'll change some of their rules the last minute as far as how delegates can vote, and
that's
or
right.
they can be completely different from each other.
What happens? Well, you'll find out a little bit later. Is once those rules are read to the conference, they can be amended. They can be changed.
Yeah.
And that happens.
Right.
And the third thing that has to be organized for a convention is that they schedule the order of business. So there's a third committee that does the programming. And there are more. You'll hear about them. So first of all, how do you establish the voting membership? Well, that's all done in the bylaws of that large group. And it has to be officially established. And so the Credentials Committee usually reads a list of delegates and their alternates at the beginning of the convention. And that, too, can be amended.
Okay,
so I want so-and-so for this delegate instead of so-and-so. And they can say that. And it all has to be voted on each time. And the Credentials Committee is very important because they actually set up the roll call for the convention.
Okay.
So
very good. Now, credentials contest?
Oh, boy. Well, in most conventions, a list of delegates is accepted and the report is adopted. But in some conventions, like our political conventions, credentials of some delegates or even entire delegations may be very hotly contested.
Right.
He has no right to be here because he or this group does not represent us because, and so it gets to be quite a harangue. Of course, the problem is with a convention, you only have a certain length of time to get things done.
Yes, exactly.
And they have to take care of that.
Yeah. And we won't even go into super delegates and things like that.
No. So it can be very complicated, and in most simpler conventions, it's not.
Yeah.
But the political conventions are the most complicated things you ever hope to see.
So adoption of the convention rules.
Again, another committee. It's called the Rules Committee, of course, and they often meet separately. Of course, they do meet separately, and they set up specific rules for the committee for the convention. Some of these rules are just timing, how to conduct business. Other rules are housekeeping rules. Every delegate has to wear a badge, for example.
Okay.
And things like that would be specific for that. And again, the rules are presented to the body, and they're voted on, and they can be changed.
Yes, exactly.
So
adoption of the convention program.
a third committee, called the program committee, of course. And the program committee actually sets the agendas for the business meetings and the schedules of all the special events.
Okay.
I might mention quickly, only agenda items can be considered specifically during the business meeting at the time when they are supposed to be considered. So they set the whole order of business, and they say how long it's going to take to do each one. It gets very specific. But as far as the other things that are going on at the conference, sometimes you'll have lectures, and people can go there, and they'll have maybe a shop. I mean, where you can go and buy things. And a lot of people spend more time there than in the business meetings.
Yes, I'm sure they do, especially on some of those conventions. Exactly. Consideration of resolutions.
Well, this is the job of the business of the convention, and that's when most everything is decided. Now, as I said, not everyone is attending this business meeting. If you're not a delegate, you're out there having fun, hopefully. These conventions can be lots of fun, and they usually are. And so there's another committee, I might say. It's called the Resolutions Committee.
Okay.
And usually the Resolutions Committee just formats the resolutions and organizes their order.
Okay.
But sometimes they have more power, and they can actually say which resolutions are going to be presented, and they can even recommend how the vote should go. They have the power to recommend prejudice of one kind or another. It's strange.
Very interesting.
So conventions are an interesting animal.
Yeah, they are. As we've seen.
They're quite different from your regular meetings in some respects.
Right.
In that they're huge, usually, and usually rare.
You're right. Usually, like you said, once a year.
Once a year.
Sometimes even every couple years in the case of some organizations. And things. Yeah, exactly. All right. Your next meeting this time around is going to be here, meaning at the Towers. It's going to be at 9 o'clock on Saturday, September 10th at the Towers for the next Robert's Rule Study Club meeting. And if you are interested in finding out some information, you can call Mike Straziuso at 949-830-8717. So again, their next meeting will be at the Towers on September 10th at 9 o'clock. Joan Milliman, thank you very much for coming on. And this was fun talking about this.
Pleasure.
Especially right now. It's
oh boy.
topic.
It's right on time.
All right. Thank you very much, and we'll be right back.